Hey everyone, I'm Anthony,
And I'm Eric.
and we're about to give you an overview of how to play Sharknado the board game. In this game, players take on the role of brave citizens of a coastal city who are fighting back against the effects of a Sharknado. This is a cooperative, scenario-based game for 2 to 4 players.
So you're joining us here in the scenario called Sharknado, named after the first movie. We're in the second round, and in this scenario, again, just like the first movie, you're going to go and find a pilot, and then search for some bombs down here in the industrial quarter. Get them to a chopper, repair it, take off, and toss them into the Sharknado to blow it up and save the day.
The game is played in 2 phases. First there's the player phase, and then there's the Sharknado phase. During the player phase, there's no specified turn order. Players use the action points allotted to their character to perform a variety of actions, like moving, searching the city, and siphoning hexes. They can do so in whatever order works best for the group. After the player phase comes the Sharknado phase. The Sharknado is going to move around the board randomly. It's going to spit out sharks. It's going to cause carnage, and it might even run over a character or 2.
There's 3 basic actions you could take during the player phase. The first one is movement. To move 1 hex, it costs 1 action token. You'll take it off your mat so you know it's spent. And of course, if you wanted to move 2, you would take a second one off. Now, let's say Katie, the purple pawn, wanted to go over here to the green one, El Gato Loco. She would move her 2 hexes and actually spend 1, 2, 3 tokens, because she moved 2 hexes, and when you move into a flooded hex, it costs 1 extra action token.
Now, the second action you can take on the player phase is to siphon a hex. Now, even though Katie just moved into the same hex as El Gato, since there's no specified turn order in this game, she could take a second action now if she wanted. So she could spend 2 action points, by taking them off her board, to siphon this hex, which would remove the flood token from the hex that they're both on. When a hex is flooded, that means a few things. First, it means that sharks can survive there longer, as you're going to see during the Sharknado phase. Second, it means that other characters have to spend that extra action point to move into that hex. The last thing it means is that characters that are on that hex can't search. So if Katie spends her 2 action points to siphon, she removes the flood token, returns it to the token pool, and as a reward, she gets to draw the top card of the city deck. And the city deck is full of useful items, equipment, and weapons that are going to help them fight the Sharknado. Now, Katie, in this case, got a pair of cross trainers, which is a type of footwear that's going to give her an extra reroll at the start of the next player phase. Now, since Katie doesn't actually have anything in her footwear slot on her character mat, she can equip that right away.
The third action you can take is searching, and it's a great way to gear up and get equipment for fighting sharks and defeating the Sharknado, but it's also a bit of a gamble. Now that Katie siphoned the hex for us, we can search. And when you search, you will choose an amount of action points that you have and set them aside. So El Gato has 7. We're going to spend 5 of them. 2, 3, 4, 5. Take them off the map. And when you spend, that's going to be your buy power. That's you're dedicating time to searching. We're always going to reveal 3 cards no matter how much you spent. So we'll take these top 3. And we've got a tool belt, which is an accessory, tactical vest, which is a chest protection, and energy drink, which is an item. Now, we spent 5, so according to the numbers that we have in the top right corner of each card, we can buy a total of 5 with our action points. So let's see. El Gato is missing an accessory, and he doesn't have chest protection, so I think we're going to go ahead and take the tool belt, put that over here, and the tactical vest. The energy drink will then go to the dump. Now, it's worth noting that these 2 characters are on the same hex, and if I got a lot of great stuff, but maybe Katie doesn't have so much, we can share at any time. We can trade freely as long as the 2 characters are in the same hex. So let's say I give her this tactical vest. She would cover up her wetsuit with it, but now she's rolling a couple of green. Now, one more thing about searching are these. This is an encounter. Cards that have a red exclamation mark on the back. Now, if I were to draw an encounter, I would still take all the cards that I was supposed to, but I would have to deal with this before I got a chance to look at what I found. So in this case, this is a fleeing cheerleader. Now, this is a citizen and has a condition in the middle which says to discard any 2 cards. If I meet that, I take her with me, and she's going to give me bonus action points at the start of the player phase. Unfortunately, if I can't discard 2 cards, or if I choose not to, then the carnage will go up, and we'll talk more about that later, but it's bad stuff. There may be locked doors or chests, other events that you find in the city deck, so careful that you don't get more than you bargained for when you search.
So those are the 3 actions that you can take on the player phase. Now, there's a reason that we didn't cover fighting sharks, and that's because it's not an action that costs action points. Fights with sharks happen automatically when a character moves into a hex that has sharks on it. So to give you an example here, let's say that Katie decides to spend 2 of her action points to move south 1 hex into this hex with 2 sharks on it. Now, the character, or the player that controls Elgato could move into that hex with her if he wanted, but for the sake of this overview, we're going to say that Katie moves in there alone and fights 2 sharks. So the first thing that we're going to do is reveal the 2 sharks that we're fighting. In this case, they are Fat Shark and the Flaming Blacktip. Now, there's a few important things about every shark card. The number in the upper right corner is the threat level, and that's the number you need to meet or beat on an 8-sided die. The number of times it bites is on the left here, and the fins represent how tough the shark is, basically how many hit points it has. At the very bottom of each card is the ability. Every shark has its own unique ability that somehow might affect the way that combat works. For example, in the case of the Flaming Blacktip, you have to discard a card from your backpack if you're injured by this shark. So, to prepare for the battle, Katie's going to check out her character sheet here, and she's going to gather the dice in her pool. In this case, she gets 1 red die, 2 yellow dice, and 1 green die. So we're going to take all those, and we're going to roll them all together. Alright, that ended up being a pretty good roll. Now, yellow dice are ranged damage. Those are guns, whips, bows and arrows, anything that can fire from a distance. And range damage has the ability to kill a shark outright. So an 8 and a 6 on range damage mean that these 2 dice could hit either of these sharks. So Katie decides that she's going to assign 1 of her range damage to the Flaming Blacktip and 1 of her range damage to Fat Shark. She also has a 7 on melee. Now that will also hit either of these sharks. Even though the Flaming Blacktip has a secondary threat of 7 specifically for melee, she rolled a red 7. Her 2 on defense, unfortunately, doesn't do anything. However, Katie has a special ability that says that if she does not make any successful defense rolls, she can re-roll her defense dice. Right now, she's only got 1. So we would essentially re-roll that until she rolled a successful defense. In this case, we did. So this is what our dice look like, and now we're going to apply the damage tokens. Apply a yellow here for these. We'll apply a red here for this, and a green here. Now the reason that the green and red don't actually go on the card is because they're simulated as happening at the same time. Red represent melee damage, and the green represent defense. So this is how a shark fight plays out once you assign your damage. The first thing you do is you check your range attacks. Did you kill any sharks? In this case, we did not, because the Flaming Blacktip has 2 fins for the 1 damage, and Fat Shark has 4 fins for the 1 damage. The next thing we check is, did sharks bite us? In the case of the Flaming Blacktip, he's only got 1 bite, and we successfully defended it. Fat Shark bites once. Katie did not successfully defend it, so she's going to get bit 1 time by Fat Shark. Now, when a character gets bit, we take these 2 green event dice, which are 6-sided dice right here. We're going to roll them both, and the result, according to our injury chart down at the bottom of the character map, which is on a scale of 2 through 12, 2 being a miss, 12 being a head bite, instant death, and everything in between. The outcome of this roll is going to determine how Katie is injured. She rolled a 9, which is, luckily, just a torso wound. Now, if Katie were to take 3 torso wounds, she would die. If Katie were to lose both arms and both legs, she would die. And if Katie were to lose her head, you know where this is going. So, Fat Shark is not dead. However, our Flaming Blacktip, now that we've successfully defended Flaming Blacktip and we were bit by Fat Shark, now we're going to account for the melee damage. So melee will come up onto the card. Now we've hit him twice. He has 2 fins, so Flaming Blacktip is dead. That's one round of the fight, and we did not successfully kill Fat Shark, so we would actually gather up our dice pool here, and we would roll a second time. We would see if we're bit by Fat Shark, and we would try to kill him again.
So the player phase continues until characters have spent all of their action points, or if chosen to hold on to a few, they will carry over between rounds. After that, the Sharknado gets its turn to wreak havoc across the city in the Sharknado phase. Now, the first thing we're going to check on the Sharknado phase to see if there are any sharks on unflooded hexes. They won't survive between rounds, so we're going to remove them from the board. There's one down here in the downtown. That goes back to the pool. And we start flipping cards. Now, the Sharknado is controlled by its own AI deck. Before each card, we're going to roll the movement die. So we'll give this a go. It is a 6, and according to this diagram, that means we're going to move the Sharknado up 1 to the northeast here. It gets closer to Katie. Whenever the Sharknado moves, if there are any sharks on that hex, it will pick those up and remove them from the board, and they will go back to the pool. And if that hex wasn't flooded, it would flood it, but it already was. Once we've moved, then we're going to flip a card, and we're going to do this moving and flipping a card once for each character. Now this is a distribution card. This is going to fling sharks all over the city in different directions. This card has a little diagram that shows how many sharks go where. The double arrow will send sharks flying 2 hexes. The single, just 1 hex in the given direction. And this arrow with the line at the end is going to make the sharks go as far as they can without hitting a character, or if it hits a border, it'll stop. So we'll show you that. We've got 2 going up 2. We've got double-sided tokens, that's 2 there. And we have 1 going to the northeast. We've got 1 going to the south. And then we've got 1 going as far as it can, which is just going to be 1 in this case. I'm sorry, we've got 3 going that far. Depending on how many players there are in the game, there is a limit to the amount of shark tokens that can go on a hex. In this case, in a 2-player game, it is 3, so we actually won't place these. So that card's finished. Then we're going to go ahead and move the Sharknado one more time. We'll roll this die. And we got a 4, and that's going to go south. Pick up this shark it just put out. It's going to flood that hex, and then we're going to flip our card. Now our second card is a Carnage card. Now the Carnage card is very simply just going to move the Carnage up 1 on the track. Now we're at 2. And Carnage is very bad. Every time a Carnage card comes out, or at the end of the Sharknado phase, that's going to go up 1. If a character dies, or if you fail to save certain citizens or complete certain events, then that can also cause the Carnage to go up as well. If this red cylinder ever meets the black square, then you've hit the limit and the Sharknado wins and you lose. Alright, so we put the Carnage up 1, and that's the end of the Sharknado phase this time. If any sharks had landed on any of the player hexes, then we would start fights and finish those before moving on to the next player phase, the next round. Since we're finished, as mentioned, we're going to move the Carnage up 1 more, straighten these cards out, and we're all set.
So once the Sharknado phase is over, a new round of the game is going to begin, starting with a new player phase. At the beginning of the player phase, each character is again going to collect their action points and their reroll tokens, and they're going to continue on with their strategy to defeat the Sharknado and win the scenario. Now every scenario in this game is unique, and not only that, but every scenario also comes with a harder difficulty for maximum replayability. So that's about it. That's an overview of how to play Sharknado the board game. That's not necessarily everything involved in the game, but it definitely gives you a good idea of how the game works. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on social media. We're on Facebook and on Twitter at Devious Devices. If you're seeing this video on our Kickstarter campaign, feel free to leave a comment or pose a question, and we will get back to you as soon as we can about that. Thanks for watching, everyone.